Hello.
Hi everyone, welcome to this, the first live stream event of Caring for Vulnerable Children. We'll start by doing the introductions first. I guess most people will know me by now. My name's Graham McPhee. I'm the course lead. I'm based here at the University of Strathclyde. Let John Paul introduce himself, because you've not met John Paul yet.
Hi there, my name's Dr. John Paul Fitzpatrick. I'm an honorary research fellow here at the University of Strathclyde, and it's great to be here.
Yep, and you'll see John Paul as the course progresses in terms of kind of some of the filmed inputs that come in later weeks. We're also here at the point at the end of the second week. Again, it's been a really good start to this run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. Over 2,800 participants and learners, so it's and from a whole range of different countries and settings, as kind of quite typically the case. So it's really good to see so many people joining the course, participating and taking part in the different discussions.
And engaging, really interesting and thought-provoking comments already, and obviously we're going to be unpicking all of that during this live stream. So yeah.
So just kind of a few technical things. If you're watching us live in real time, you've got the ability to communicate with us in real time. If there's any particular questions that you want to pose to us, so if you kind of post them in, then they'll get communicated. You might see my hand disappear off to the side and they'll get passed over to me, and we'll respond to them in real time.
When Graham says post them in, it doesn't mean literally post them in. The UK postal system's not that efficient, I don't think.
Yeah, so there's the link on the page, and there's also our Twitter hashtag, which is Caring for Vulnerable Children. Sarah, can you help me quickly? Sorry, I've forgotten the Twitter hashtag.
This is very live.
Caring for Vulnerable Children. The links on the links on the page. We've got two or three main things that we want to cover in the course of the session today. We've got the poll that we set up in week one. Now that the results of this will become available on the page as well. But we've got the results. We're not going to go through them in minute detail, but there's some different bits and pieces coming out of that I think are kind of quite interesting that we'll chat about. Second thing we're going to do is we're now 2 weeks into Billy's story, and we'd asked for both after week one and week two for people to comment on Billy's story as it was playing out and issues that was raised for him. So we'll pull out some comments from the chat board and kind of use them as a means to just discuss some of the things going on in Billy's story. And then thirdly, we'd ask people to post any questions in advance, and we've kind of some different questions posted to us, and we're going to take the chance to respond to them. But let's say if you do want to contact us now, I've got the actual, so it's that the hashtag FL_children. So that's the hashtag, so you can contact us via that, and if there's any questions you'd like to get to us in real time, we'll try our best to respond to them. So let's start with the poll results. So, and I guess just to put a wee bit of kind of context round about this. Also, the poll, we give you 10 very short scenarios, and it's important to kind of stress at this point that this is an academic exercise. This is an exercise to stimulate a bit of thought and discussion about some attitudes round about risk and vulnerability. If any sort of practitioner, be it a social worker, a nursery teacher, a school teacher, a youth worker, whoever it might be, been involved in anything like this, they would obviously be dealing with, and they would need to get more information to be making kind of thorough assessments on. So that isn't what this exercise is about. This exercise is just about kind of getting people to begin to think about the notions of risk and vulnerability, and what do we consider risky or vulnerable, and then we ask you to engage in this exercise about how you're going to rank these against each other. So say you get 10 scenarios, you'll get 10 one-line scenarios effectively, but we ask you to pick what you saw as the 3 most risky or most vulnerable, and we've got the results kind of sitting in front of us in terms of the scenarios that gathered the most votes. Now we've run this course a number of times now, and just about every time we do it is the same 3 scenarios that gather the most votes. And so in that sense, the the kind of some of the themes that are coming out seem to be quite consistent. So the first scenario number one, 82% of participants who took part in the vote had that in their top three. A tiny baby has been getting a violent shaking by their carer who has learning difficulties and upset because the baby won't stop crying. We've got this scenario with the second most amount of votes is scenario 4. A 6-month-old baby boy who's not had any attention or anything to eat for 10 hours. 62% of people picked that. And then scenario 5, a 4-year-old girl who's a mother who's suffering from depression, is not bothered to feed her for 24 hours, has got 51%. So,
yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So, Graham, I would be keen to know, what do you think is driving and maybe behind people's picking these scenarios over some of the others?
Yeah, well, I guess when we look at the scenarios, that the two that get the most votes involve a baby and a tiny baby and a 6-month-old baby. So I think kind of straight away we've got participants can identify that when, in terms of kind of age, agency, capacity, and babies being utterly, totally dependent upon the adult carers round about them. So they're getting information here about the adult carers round about them are potentially not caring for them. They're potentially not understanding the impact that their behaviour might have on them, and that's certainly been the case in the first scenario about the carer with learning difficulties shaking the baby, and I guess perhaps read into that as shaking the baby to try and get them to stop crying and not understanding how harmful or potentially dangerous that might be. So I think we've got this sense of kind of young children who are totally dependent on the adults round about them to offer them care and protection. And when that care and protection isn't being offered to them, then that really causes a lot of concern about risk and vulnerability. And then even the one that got third most votes, 51%, is a 4-year-old girl. The mother's suffering from depression, and I'm aware that the way the scenarios are worded, who has not bothered to feed her for 24 hours. I guess in some ways that's worded in a
provocative, very provocative statement.
Because you could word that if it said who has not been able to feed her for 24 hours, it might put a slightly different slant on it. But I think it is worded kind of quite provocatively in terms of kind of suggesting that there's an element of choice about that, about they could feed them if they wanted to, perhaps, and they're not bothering to, or they're choosing to, or something like that. But again, we've got this sense of that's different to certainly some of the scenarios where we've got kind of older children where they might be deemed to have more agency. I mean, same question back to yourself. Would you guess kind of some of the same things that at play there?
Absolutely. I suppose it all ties into people's perceptions of risk, of vulnerability, and I suppose, although we're saying that social workers have to operate and other professionals helping children operate with much more information, it does, I suppose, concentrate the mind in a world of limited resources, limited time, pressure on individuals when they're in these types of helping professions. Where do they prioritise and place effort and risk? But I suppose I'm quite intrigued about let's play devil's advocate and look at some of the ones that didn't yield such a response from everyone. So let's just go with the 8-year-old girl of Afro-Caribbean origin who's just had her hair cut short because of her white foster carer finds it difficult to manage. So on the surface, that one looks fairly innocuous. What is your hair? Well, your hair is everything when you're 8 years old. You're trying to fit in, there's issues around identity, there's issues around cultural assimilation, there's issues in there around resilience and fitting in. So that 8-year-old girl, that should be kind of flagging up a training need for the foster carers, just so you start to unpick. Again, I'm making lots of assumptions just from the reading of that statement. But I suppose what we're trying to do, as Graham said, is really provoke you to think critically about what decisions would you make in these situations. What decisions would you make for Billy and family when we go on to discuss that? That always gets you exercise. So yeah, really interesting.
Yep, and that, okay, I'm glad you picked that example, because whilst some scenarios have got more votes than others, the simple truth of it is that if all 10 of these were real life scenarios, there would be things to follow up in all of them.
Absolutely.
All of them have got issues of kind of risk and vulnerability and concern. Some more immediate than others, and perhaps that's the difference in terms of the scenario you've just described there with the haircut. That's I guess a longer term issue in that sense, and it's less immediate than the one that got the most votes in terms of that tiny baby being shaken and being in a potentially kind of risky situation. So we can understand why that gets far more votes in terms of that's in the top three. Something's got to be done about that.
Well, I suppose part of the challenge, and this is a theme that runs throughout the course, early intervention and providing a support to a low-level kind of challenge or risk or situation, versus then how these things can mount and become more cumulative and other kind of compound factors that lead to an escalation of the risk. So, and I know that's something that we unpick throughout. So,
and absolutely, and I think there's a kind of a strong link there to Billy's story, and that'll become all the more evident as the 6 weeks go on, and kind of linking this back to potentially professional tasks and roles, and again, if we use it could be a social worker, it could be a teacher, it could be a child support agency, it could be kind of any number of agencies, but about the really challenging task that a lot of professionals will have in terms of prioritising kind of cases in terms of what they can devote time and resource to, and almost imagine these being 10 referrals that come in, what will get the most immediate response? Well, it will be the tiny baby, it will be the 6-month-old baby boy, because there's the most immediate risk and concern there. But equally, it would be really worrying if some of the other cases slipped off the agenda completely at the other end. And one of the themes that we will probably talk about more in week 4 and week 6 when we repeat these events is the challenges that are presented to a range of agencies and services, because some of these low-level cases never get to the front of the queue because there's always a new high priority case coming in, and we've got tightening resources, and can we spend the time on all the children that we like? So that's a kind of a really kind of useful, interesting kind of exercise. And what we encourage people to do is you haven't already, kind of go back into the page when the results get posted, and you can see you can see how you voted, and it'll be interesting to compare the results to the 3 that you selected, and continue to comment on that and kind of keep the discussion going. And there'll be other exercises like this as we move through the 6 weeks. Now, we mentioned Billy's story a couple of times there, so let's kind of move on to Billy's story. So by now you'll kind of get a kind of sense of kind of how Billy's story works. There's going to be kind of 6 weeks worth of story with kind of different developments on a week by week basis. So we're currently at the end of week 2 just now. You've been introduced to kind of Billy's situation and his family, and I guess the main question you were asked after week 2 is, compared to week 1 now and the new information that you've got, do you feel more or less concerned about Billy? And I've pulled out some comments here, but largely there's a trend to most of the comments that we were seeing that shows that people were saying, actually, I feel more concerned about Billy now. And it's not to say there's no positive or mitigating factors there, and people have identified some of those, but saying overall that overall picture of concern. And probably actually, just before we go further, just to kind of put Billy's story in context, Billy's story is obviously kind of fictional, it's kind of made up. There is no Billy in real life, but this fictional story is very much based on reality. So whilst there's no Billy in real life, there's actually there's thousands of Billies in real life. And no, Billy's story is set in Scotland. We're a university kind of set in Scotland, and it's kind of, in a sense, kind of set in that kind of current context. But the whilst the story itself isn't based on any one person, it's based on kind of circumstances that many families up and down the country will be kind of dealing with and challenged.
Absolutely, it's almost that kind of composite, a compound of different kind of issues interweaved together to get you all thinking about the issues. And actually, I would suggest it's globally we're talking millions.
Yes.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in similar situations.
And so naturally, just before we go any further talking about Billy's story, one of the things that we would constantly prompt you to, and is that almost if you're not from Scotland, because we know a lot of our participants are from Scotland, so you'll be able to immediately identify with the context and the challenges that we're talking about. But it's no less relevant to any participants from any other countries, anywhere else in the world. And we know we'll get kind of, as always, we'll get a kind of a pretty much kind of global audience in that sense. And that's one of the things that's really nice about a course such as this, where we see different people from different settings, from different countries, speaking to each other on the chat boards, commenting different things and swapping ideas and experiences. And we would always encourage people who are from outside of Scotland to think about, right, these issues that we're talking about, how do these play out in your setting? Like, kind of, what are they comparable? Are they different? What are the kind of characteristics that are more or kind of less pronounced? So I think there's a kind of, and there's always a helpfulness for all of us in terms of looking at examples from elsewhere as a way to analyse our own situation more. So you'll hear me and John Paul kind of quite consistently saying to you, right, think about how does this play out in your country, in your setting. So going back to Billy's story,
yes,
kind of summarising a lot of the comments, looking in terms of Billy's relationship with his mum, kind of saying that you can see that there's a really significant relationship there. So that's a strength, but equally being worried about the impact that relationship has on Billy in terms of kind of mum's own needs and her own mental health issues, and how available she can be for Billy, and about kind of some of the stresses and strains that might be placed on Billy. That then, I guess, connects into a fair amount of comment about concern about Billy's isolation in that sense, in terms of that sense of kind of Billy not having a huge amount of kind of peer connections or support, and about becoming isolated in some way, and that perhaps being an impact of that being his kind of home scenario. Fair amount of comment about Dad, and obviously kind of participants introduced to Dad this sense, and as always, I think it'd be fair to say that in terms of the comments, Dad doesn't come out too favourably.
No,
in terms of the comments, and that's always a feature at this point in the course. And I guess I think there's always kind of two sides to the discussion here, and I think we've got to guard against instantly condemning and instantly
judging and making assumptions again about what's going on.
Yeah. So what we did get introduced to in the story this week is that we know the contact that Billy has with his dad is sporadic, and Dad kind of sometimes doesn't turn up for contact or visits when he says that he's going to, and that can be difficult for Billy, and that can be challenging, and we know that happens in many situations in real life, and we're not kind of questioning that, but sometimes I think occasionally we can get comments that almost judge Dad on what's driven or motivated that behaviour. Now the bottom line is, as participants, you don't know, we don't know, so I think we've got to guard against kind of jumping on Dad's back too quickly in that sense, and so we don't see the same comments about Billy's mum. And we're like, well, what's the difference here? Is, well, the participants have been introduced to the fact that, well, Billy's mum's got some things going on for her in relation to her own health and her own mental health, so there's perhaps less rush to judgment in a sense, whereas all we know about Dad is he's a bit sporadic, he's a bit unreliable, and so we see different sorts of comments here, and I think that's quite interesting just to reflect on about kind of generally kind of some of the discourse and conversations that can happen about different communities and different groups of people, and how they can be judged either harshly or unfairly because of certain characteristics that are
that absolutely makes sense. And again, a lot of that will depend on the cultural context of where you're living. But do fathers, for example, get judged to be the person in situations, for example, of custody, to be not the person that automatically is the best caregiver because they're a man? There's all sorts of stuff around gender. We've got stuff around the kind of roles of the traditional roles and constructs around family. So you start to unpick all of that. So we're all, I suppose, operating through filters depending on our own cultural context, filters depending on our own experience, or filters depending on what the kind of current themes and trends are in the society and the cultural context in which we live in, that all kind of serve to blight our thinking. And I suppose what we are encouraging all of you to do is to really have an open mind in terms of looking at the bits of the theory that we present in the course, look at the issues that Billy is facing and what that actually means, and start to just think more critically about what your own position is based on what the bits and pieces that you're reading, the videos, etc., that you're watching. So that level of insight is really, really important, because as professions in the field of child and youth care, or social work, or youth work, or any of the allied professions, that ability to be non-judgmental in our practice is really, really important. So this is a good grounding for you in that.
Yeah, and actually, not jumping too much to a different context, but that bit about kind of labels and stereotypes, and we touch on the theme of poverty a fair amount during the 6 weeks, and certainly in week 1 in the first video of Billy's story, and we talk about and comment upon in a Scottish context kind of levels of poverty and the relationship between poverty and vulnerability and risk, and certainly when we get towards weeks 5 and 6, we kind of delve into that in a bit more detail again. But I guess, thinking about perhaps some of the reactions towards Dad and some of the things that we read or don't read into behaviours and what might be fueling that. And I think about kind of some of the kind of general either kind of social or political attitudes towards people in poverty, people in benefits, people out of work, and some of the almost the lazy language and labels that get thrown about that can really be kind of quite discriminatory and disabling for people. So I think it's really important that whatever role we have and whatever kind of part we play in this, be it in a professional, a volunteering role, or more just as a member of a community, society, that we do what John Paul's talking about in terms of kind of thinking critically about kind of the kind of why things are the way they are, and before we quickly jump to conclusions or judgments. So that for me is triggered by just kind of some of the comments about Dad that are, I think, potentially a little bit harsh based on the information
that is presented
that we've got. It's a completely fair comment for people to be saying that if there is a regular contact between Billy and his dad, and if there is instances when he thinks he's meeting him and he's not, that will be difficult and challenging for Billy. Neither me nor John Paul or anybody would kind of sit and say otherwise, but simply saying that Dad is bad or other words to that effect doesn't really kind of help the scenario move forward.
It's too simplistic. So what we're needing is a more of a kind of critical level of critique and thinking and shaping your own judgments, and it's important to think through, I suppose, what the drivers for behaviour might be, and for you to actually start to think through, well, what then does good intervention look like in an ideal world as the story unfolds as well.
So picking up on that in terms of what good intervention could or might look like, another thing that was common in a lot of the comments was people saying one of the strengths here, one of the things that's nice to see is the relationship that Billy has with one particular member of staff, one teacher at school. And I've picked out 4 comments here: Grace Cabarrou, Amy Cotton, Sheena Johnson, and Sharon Wade. Thanks, Grace, Amy, Sheena, and Sharon for your comments. And all of them within longer comments pick up on, and they're not the only 4 people that do that. There's many others that have done it also. Kind of pick up on the fact about this kind of plus point here, this kind of strength that's here about Billy having this contact at school, somebody that he, and what we've seen from the story this week, somebody that he can confide in a little bit, and he's kind of offering a level of support that doesn't appear to be available elsewhere. So I guess it adds up to this picture of we've got this other kind of safety bit here, this positive, but overall the sense was people still being more concerned about Billy than they were not. And it's not uncommon for us to have comments at this point about people saying an organisation or people need to get in there. And so linking this back to our 10 scenarios, I guess what we'll often talk about at this point.
Well, would there be enough there to from an outside organisation's point of view looking in? Do you think actually this would be on the radar of anyone?
Sadly, no. Now that's us not saying that Billy doesn't have needs. That's not us sitting saying that Billy wouldn't benefit from extra support or potentially some intervention. But the reality, I think, for most organisations and services, certainly in a kind of Scottish context just now, in terms of that kind of spectrum of needs, spectrum of vulnerability and risk, there's probably far more families and far more Billies ahead of them in the queue because there's more acute needs. And again, in that sense, we can understand why then Billy doesn't receive a service, but linking it back to your earlier discussion about the picking the scenario that only got the 1%. When we don't respond to it, what we do know then is that are we saving something further up for down the line, and sometimes the frustration that a lot of us experience in terms of a organisations almost being in a constant firefighting scenario where it's only, pardon me, some cases where things get to crisis point or near crisis point that actually triggers a response and an intervention.
A really interesting example of that would be just now in terms of mental health. We have referrals in a Scottish context at their highest level ever for community and mental health services for children and young people in Scotland. So that is where young people are at the point of crisis and needing support with their mental health, and find that the actual waiting lists and support can take up to 16 weeks before a child or a young person who's experiencing difficulties is actually seen. So, Billy's situation, as described here, people are saying that, in many of the comments, particularly around kind of Grace's, that you benefit from friendship, because what actually here is a real kind of need there for positive relationships, for support in terms of boosting resilience for both mum and for Billy. So there is a huge kind of shift, or an emerging shift, in terms of our awareness and understanding of the need of that type of support and service. But again, is it backed up by the finance for it to be there? So interesting.
And so naturally, so just in terms of responding to some comments that are coming in real time, we've got a comment here. It's from Carolina. So I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And just the conversation we're having about Dad and kind of saying that picking up on the point is Dad needing some help too as well, and it's about the we're kind of, and saying that absolutely. So rather than us rushing to condemn Dad in terms of that Dad's been unreliable, Dad's letting Billy down, and that's the end of it. That actually, well, what's going on for Dad? That's
it does make you. That's a really good point, Carolina, about maybe the need for whole family support, whole family intervention, rather than just working with one particular aspect of what's going on in a family, but actually to work with the context and support the whole family at the point of need in terms of where they're at.
Yep. So want to move on to it because we've got kind of 10 or 15 minutes left. We had some questions posted in advance, so it'd be good to kind of make a point response. And the first one came in from, we normally always like to kind of name people when they put their question in and kind of say thank you. Somebody's just gone by the initials of CN. So CN, so if you know who you are, CN, thanks for your question. They asked, I would like to know at what point in the relationship the attachment becomes irreparable. Can someone go from attached to disorganized attachment, then back again, for instance? I'm just wondering about a neuroplasticity. No, trying to say it, neuroplasticities effect. I don't think I even said it.
I live for moments like this during a live stream.
Kind of said that. So this question of kind of attachments, repairable or irreparable. I'm really kind of tripping over my words at this point. Now, I guess my basic starting point would be that there is always the scope for repair, for improvement, and I very much worry about us getting into situations where we write off either individuals or relationships as being beyond the point of repair. And
actually, the point that CN's making about get into the Vietnam of quagmire of neuroplasticity,
yes,
is really important, because actually what that in essence means is that the synaptic pathways and connections between the brain form and grow and can recover. So the more that we have children and young people, for example, who've experienced trauma, have then a positive experience in a caring, nurturing, supportive environment, then the brain and those pathways can recover, and emotionally, with the right levels of support, children and young people can flourish and thrive. And we know that from many millions of care experienced children and young people who've been on to thrive and have amazing, inspirational lives. So I think that there is absolutely hope here that any kind of damage is reparable. It does depend, I would assume, on the level of diagnosis and level of family support and the right levels of interventions being put in place to encourage that recovery and support and development. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah. So so the message that we would want to get across, and I think we would continually want to give across as part of these sessions, as part of this course, is that we should never be, to use the phrase, writing off individuals or relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that never writing them off doesn't mean that we shouldn't be constantly assessing and thinking about vulnerability and risk. And sometimes that will lead professionals to have to take difficult decisions with regards to kind of where children live and stay and who they can safely have contact with. It doesn't mean a kind of free card for anybody in that, but equally just writing people off and shutting doors doesn't help things either.
No, because actually, if you think about it, from a young person who's experienced in family difficulties or family breakdown, how many different groups of professionals over the course of their lives might they work with? And actually, what we do need is a consistency of relationship. Actually, we need professionals and those that are in the lives of children and young people to be constant, to be available, to stick with them for the long haul, to invest time and effort and care, and dare I say it, and I know this comes up throughout, love in terms of being there. So that's so important.
Yep. So let's move another couple of questions. So we had a question posted in advance, and then we've actually had another couple have come in real time that Sarah's just been passing to me here that can all touch on some similar themes. So jumping, Deborah Boyle had posted a question in advance. So Deborah, thanks for your question. And she'd asked a question specifically about, I would like to know at what stage should a support teacher step in and report these conversations to outside agencies. This is talking in the context of Billy's story. And so asking that question, when's a teacher get involved? And Elizabeth Jane Rodian has posted in Lifetime saying at what stage would the school intervene in Billy's situation. And so the kind of two questions very much in the same area. And I guess in the first instance, again, going back to this theme of the reality kind of where Billy's kind of situation is just now, whilst the story that we're telling the Billy's, no, it's got 3 or 4 minutes every week, so it's only got a certain amount of information. I think we can safely work on the assumption that that conversation has happened because Billy has felt safe enough to initiate a conversation with his teacher. He's kind of sought them out, and that might be the way kind of many relationships like that kind of develop in the first instance. So there's a bit about I think schools trying to create a culture and individual teachers trying to practice in a way where they communicate that openness and that availability, so that if young people are experiencing issues, that children feel able to kind of seek them out and seek some sort of
and also
support.
Teaching staff, certainly in a Scottish context, and in fact actually a UK context. I'm doing some work in a school in Manchester at the moment. Children know the limits to confidentiality. So teachers are very upfront normally in their engagement with children and young people to say, look, I'm always here for you, and anything you tell me is confidential, but the limit to that confidentiality becomes if I think that you are at risk of harm either to yourself or indeed you harming someone else. So a simple statement like that usually is said to the young people, and usually they're able to tell you that back. So they're absolutely kind of grounded in that. So that confidentiality is really, really important. There's schools across the UK have very clear child protection and safeguarding policies where the pupils' support and welfare is of paramount importance.
Yeah, and in question to that specific bit about what stage would the school potentially intervene in terms of thinking what the school's intervention might be, it would really be about passing information on to other agencies, be it kind of social work in the first instance. So what you've just said there about what teachers should and would be communicating to Billy or anybody else in the situation, saying that, well, what happened between us in the first instance, but if what you need to know is that if what you tell me raises sufficient concerns, then I can't just sit with this, and I would need to pass it on, I would need to share it, but I would let you know that I was doing that. It wouldn't happen in secret to the child. And again, we had another question posted in advance. This one came from James Borg. So James, thanks for your question. Now, you asked some specific questions that in some ways we can't answer, because you're asking from what age did Billy start to get supported emotionally? Were there any reports done? Is he coping in the classroom setting? So the simple fact is that information doesn't exist about Billy. But if you think about kind of stepping out of kind of Billy's scenario and just kind of thinking about how that would apply kind of more generally, and specifically, I think the interesting bit there for me is, have there been any reports to social work about Billy and vulnerability issues? Because that's beginning to get into the bit of a more joined up approach and different agencies talking to each other and communicating with each other. Because so far in Billy's story, you've seen him speaking to the support worker at school. Now, don't want to give any spoilers away, and we won't, but as the story progresses, you're going to see different professionals becoming involved. So there's always a task, and there's challenges for different agencies when we're involved in supporting children and young people, in terms of that happening in a joined up and a communicative way. Sometimes that joined up bit works really well, and there's lots of fantastic examples of that. But sadly, equally, we've got more than enough examples of when that doesn't happen as well. So that is a consistent challenge, I would suggest, for different agencies in terms of how they do manage these things.
The response, the communication between the different agencies, getting the right information at the right time, having the right personnel in place to be able to deal with it. There's so many complicating factors when you're working across organisations, and I'd be keen to know how what your perceptions are of how this is working wherever you are. You know, what does the local and national media say where you are about kind of big child protection incidences? What's working well in your country context? So I'd be keen for you to kind of be sharing that in your comments as well.
Yep. Two last comments I want to kind of pick up on just before we get into the last couple of minutes here. But actually, we had a question posted in advance from Margaret Ann Cusack, and she touched on a couple of things. One of the things she mentions is ACEs, which is a an acronym, an area of work that's becoming increasingly focused in Scotland. And given actually the time, what I'm going to suggest is that rather than us try and do this in a really rushed way, is that we keep hold of Margaret's question, and we know what's coming in Billy's story in a couple of weeks' time, actually, and we pick up in that.
Good idea.
Then, so Margaret, we will come back to that question in 2 weeks' time. We going back to our discussion about the polls at the beginning, and then some of the stuff around about Billy, and we had a comment come into us during the session from Patricia Carbongio. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly there. And just said, I'd say the insights from the poll were generally reactive versus preventative, and said, could the same go with people's reactions to Billy's story? Most were coming from pity. It would be nice to see a focus on a strengths-based perspective. Now we talk about kind of, well, I'm sitting here in the context of working in a university and trying to promote very much kind of strengths-based perspective continually, but I wouldn't for a second want to minimise or simplify the very real challenges and tasks that especially child protection social workers face, certainly in a Scottish and a UK context, on a day-to-day basis, where working in some really challenging kind of situations with high levels of risk and concern about children and young people, and how challenging it must be to try and keep hold of a strengths-based perspective in amongst some of the real concerns and risks, and think about, I've got to keep these children safe here.
That's I mean, and being able to stay true to maintaining that kind of strengths-based or asset-based perspective is so important. So and it's a theme that comes throughout the whole of the rest of the run of the course as well.
Okay, but as ever, we kind of started at the beginning, think we're going to have loads of time to get through everything, and the 40 minutes kind of flies by. So thanks for joining us, your participation. I'd like to say a real big thank you to the people that have communicated with us in real time, and we can hope there's more of that in weeks 4 and week 6, because it's always nice to get some feedback and reactions to our comments as we're actually talking, so that we can get the chance to come back. Likewise, please post questions in advance of weeks 4, and Margaret, I promise we'll come back to your question, and we'll pick up on that in week 4. But until then, enjoy the next 2 weeks of the course, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
And just remember, today's live stream is brought to you with the word neuroplasticity, which we're going to go and rehearse saying amongst ourselves in the privacy when this broadcast is finished. So thank you. Keep contributing.
Thank you. Bye now.